Hello, my name is Peter Hall. I'm a vice president at Wood and the global director for sustainable and resilient infrastructure. And I'm really privileged today to provide this presentation on how to build back better and how we can create sustainable and resilient infrastructure in communities. Wood is an engineering and consultancy organization that's really united by a common purpose to unlock solutions to some of the world's most critical challenges. And we're always looking for new possibilities to improve, the world today for tomorrow. And really that frames a lot of what I want to discuss today. Some of the key, some of the key outcomes of building back better and some of the roadmaps and solutions that we can bring to organizations and businesses and cities to do this collectively in a better way. Some of the things I want to touch on today is, what are some of the outcomes of building back better? What does it look like? The role of business and government and how they can enable this required shift. Some of the key attributes to building back better. What are the time horizons we need to look at? And really just the idea that the projects we build are more than just an asset. They deliver services to communities. A presentation that just highlights the problem is not really creating the transformation that's needed. And I definitely want to leave you with some roadmaps and some solutions that we're working on to achieve building back better projects. So a couple themes that we're seeing right now that are really important and drive this shift is the energy transition and reliability, and then also sustainable infrastructure and resiliency. These two really run in parallel. They're connected and they're integrated, and we need to solve both sides of the coin, both sides of this these challenges together to really create the world that we need to get to very quickly. In a lot of ways, we need to do this in the next 5 years. We don't have a lot of time, so how we build these projects now is absolutely critical. And you look at what the events in Texas just recently. It was more than just an energy failure and an infrastructure failure. It was the two combined. So as we work in advance to COP26 on the race to net zero, and the race to resiliency, we're really looking at the two. The idea that we don't want to produce carbon, we want to reach decarbonization solutions, but at the same time, we don't want to have blackouts. We want to have reliable services. So these really need to be run in parallel, and they're really a big part of building back better. It's interesting for the race to net zero, the goals are fairly clear. We have 51 billion tons of carbon in the air that we need to reduce to zero. How to get there is a challenge. The race to resiliency is even more difficult because the goals aren't as clear. A lot of the work in this area are harder to measure, and the impact's harder to measure, and there's a lot more interdependencies. But we need to tie both of these together to really transform the infrastructure that we build. They both generate improvements in capacity building, job creation, and economic development. So, of course, COVID is really, the crisis of our time, and we really need to use this as an opportunity to get this right. And while the pandemic has really created an economic and health shock, climate shocks and stresses are also increasing in frequency in magnitude. And the return to investment models of the past really are going to struggle to transform from this. And some of the key things we've seen in the COVID recovery is certainly looking at future scenarios and building that into our projects, but looking at key drivers such as circular economy, how work's going to change, how important putting community at the center of this work is, and the role of stimulus funds in how we progress in this work. So one of the key things on the COVID recovery is, we can't afford a business as usual approach. We need to use this as a key shock and the associated stresses to realize a just and resilient recovery. And really, it gets to a big change in this is really putting the community well-being and equity at the focus of our work and looking at longer time horizons for the projects that we build. So we really need to use this as a time to really advance the work we do collectively to build back better. So, what are some of the key themes on this right now that we're looking at? Certainly, infrastructure that we build, it has to be able to respond to shocks and stresses in a changing climate. We need to look at new ways to fund projects, new financing mechanisms, new innovative and public-private partnerships. In projects that leverage and integrate sustainability across the full life cycle and value chain are more important than ever. A project isn't done when we just build it. We have to operate it and maintain it so that resilience value is maintained over its lifespan. And at the same time, we have to build assets that can contribute to a net zero world. So when we build projects, we have to look at creative ways to, bring in renewable energy and energy efficiency. And really at the core of this is improving the quality of life in the cities where we live and work. If we do this right, we can build back better. And I'll talk more about this in the presentation, but the resilience dividend, the outputs from these projects is something we really need to look at and address as we move forward, so that we can thrive and not just survive. So some of the things right now that we're looking at that are really important is a common definition, right? So a common definition around urban resilience, and it's really the resilience of not just companies and cities, but the individuals and communities that live in these places. And it's the ability to really adapt to chronic stresses and shocks as they occur. So some of the big shocks we're seeing, of course, pandemics, economic volatility, wildfires, sea level rise, and even health impacts. Those are big impacts, but chronic stresses also need to be incorporated into this work. And we really need roadmaps and partners that all work off of the same definition around resilience, and we really just have one chance to get this right. And in building back better, again, the projects we build have to transform communities, and this is achievable. But as I'll discuss in the presentation, we have to build in stakeholder engagement and outputs early in projects so we can transform communities and really put communities at the center. Put communities and people at the center of this work. In a lot of ways, resilient infrastructure equals resilient communities, or can lead to resilient communities. And we have to engage stakeholders early and often. And, resilient infrastructure, the projects that we build, we need to develop these through a study of both current conditions and a range of future conditions, and engage with both impacted communities and also target beneficiaries. And these projects have to have the flexibility to account for future uncertainties. So what will these projects look like? So this is a key part of what I wanted to convey today is, these projects are going to look different. And I just want to take a look at a few of the sectors that may see the most change in as we build back better. Cities where we live, they need to grow more equitably. They need to include flood resilient housing. They need to access clean transportation, improved air quality, and really improved livability. I'll give you an example. We've done some work in Norfolk, in the U.S. Managing flooding, chronic flooding in an underutilized neighborhood. That allowed a neighborhood to transform, to bring in new businesses, new economic models. And for a small pilot project in the order of $250,000, that allowed a city like that to then scale, transform, and access, a $40 million investment in the waterside district, because they could manage flooding and they tied it to improved livability. Agriculture, how we provide the food that we need. It's going to really change around shocks and stresses and extreme weather. And then industry, of course, it's going to be so critical for net zero throughout the supply chain, and they need to address responsible sourcing and asset operation. Cities are both big carbon emitters and drivers for GDP and breakthroughs. So these industries are going to change as well. So one of the things we're looking at is, how do we win this race? So what are the key factors towards resilience? Of course, we need to engage with the right people and the right stakeholders in our projects early, ask the right questions, at the right time. We need to really leverage projects for sustainable development goals and environmental social governance, alignment and reporting, and those outcomes. Look for new modes of financing to drive towards a resilience dividend, and then leverage partnerships and really look at partnerships and how they can transform our projects. These are some of the key factors that we need to incorporate into our projects as we build back better. So some of the things around transforming infrastructure that we've been looking at for a while is there's a cost to embed resilience as we build back better. Some estimates put it at 15 to 20% of capital costs to include the additional features to build an asset at a greater height, better location, better materials, leverage other adaptation technologies. So there's a cost, but that cost is a payback because the infrastructure doesn't fail. But perhaps just as importantly, it can provide outcomes over the lifespan of its project that can return, increased housing, economics, access to healthcare, better emergency response, social equity. There's a lot of things these projects can do if we do it better. And you look at the infrastructure gap, 15 trillion by 2030. There's a gap there, and we need to build this critical infrastructure looking at the resilience dividend. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the ways we're developing projects to address a resilience return on investment. So one of the key things to achieve projects that can build back better, provide these outcomes, is really roadmaps. Planning these projects early and often with the right people, the right stakeholders, so that we can measure the resilience outputs and really get projects built, get them shovel ready, in the ground, underway, and implemented. And roadmaps really can provide the outcomes and solutions to unlock a range of solutions that are needed. So I want to talk today a little bit about some of the things that we're looking at as we develop projects that can build back better. Of course, we need to understand what the project is, what are its outputs, what are the drivers, and where is a client starting from to build back better? What's the objective of the project? Once we understand that part of a project and really leverage stakeholder engagement and build projects through a resilience-based process, then we're looking at assessing how can we bring in projects, screen options, measure results, and really prioritize projects for impact, so projects can deliver a reliable performance and the intended outcomes. And then during delivery, the lifespan of the project, making sure that the resilience values and attributes are in that project between construction and operation and maintenance and even decommissioning, so that the project, one, can deliver co-benefits and also minimizes negative impacts to the communities which it supports, so it can deliver resilience over the lifespan. So a couple of roadmaps that we're working on now that we've used successfully is in the road to net zero. So as companies and organizations and cities look at projects and operations and services that contribute to a net zero world, it's really important to roadmap what those are. So one of the areas that we work on is advising clients around key areas, key targets they're working towards. What are the timeframes? What are your stakeholders? What policies are you under? What are some of your key supply chains that you can influence? And up front, planning these projects well. For those of you who have read the recent Bill Gates book, he talks a lot about the green premium and prioritizing impact. Well, we do that in the assess phase. So we look at how can clients best progress towards net zero. It could be a mixture of renewable energy, better distribution networks for the energy that they provide or generate, carbon capture, energy efficiency. But really looking at this with a lens of cost-benefit analysis and what are some of the high priority actions that any company can take. And then delivering those so they get built on time and deliver the outcomes. And importantly with this, any project also has to be built in a resilient way. So when these projects are built, we also need to look at what are the shocks and stresses that could impact the project. What are some of the disruptors and key stakeholders, and what are some of the financial impacts of those projects? So when we adapt for resiliency, we use a roadmap for our projects. So we look at those impacts. We look at how a project can better analyze data upfront. Look at a client's vision, a city's vision or targets. Build those in early, and then from that, develop projects that can protect assets, not just physical assets, but people, supply chains, key stakeholders can improve the opportunities for vulnerable populations. Projects that both protect other assets or in and of themselves have attributes that can allow them to withstand disruptions. But once a project's built, it still has to deliver its outcome. So we look at project management, delivery mechanisms so that over the lifespan of the project, it can deliver outputs around resiliency, have the flexibility in these projects so that they can deliver the outcomes and the performance metrics that are needed throughout the delivery. And a lot of these financial mechanisms, public-private partnerships, rely on revenue streams over the lifespan of the project. The delivery phase of this is designed to ensure that can be met. And if we do this right, we can transform the communities that our projects support. So, we can generate ESG and SDG metrics and performance metrics and really measure outcomes from projects to transform and then generate resiliency. So these two roadmaps together can really help projects, improve their net zero journey and their targets, and at the same time do it in a resilient way. And of course, a key thing around that is how do you measure this? So how do you tactically then take this and measure the resilience performance of a project? So one of the things we've worked on now and we've been utilizing for projects is a resilience screen that can be applied over our Adapt for Resilience methodology. And it was developed in conjunction with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Resilient Cities Network, and really in partnership with a range of other stakeholders to fill a gap in the market, a resilient screen that looks at both the ability of a project to withstand future vulnerabilities and generate and monetize and evaluate co-benefits is something that's still needed. So this work is really allowing us to work with our clients to maximize investment opportunities, to better access capital, create bankable projects in the pre-feasibility stage, and really provide a critical link between infrastructure and finance. And it's really a way that we can build back better, that we can build better projects and get the key attributes in there early. Funding is going to be a key issue for our clients. The ability to access private equity and public-private debt and various revenue streams is going to be very important. And this screen is actually part of the toolkit for a resilient recovery that the Resilient Cities Network is using in over 100 cities to help cities build back better. And what the screen really does is it looks at key attributes that I've been talking about today. Resilience-based process and the intended outcomes of projects and the ability to bring in stakeholders at the right times and measure co-benefits and make sure projects don't generate negative consequences in their construction. And really what this does is it allows us and our clients and investors to prioritize projects, look at key gaps and strengths to improve projects, and really, as we begin to measure these outputs, support a just and resilient recovery through this work. And investors are using it. This screen is being used by Meridian Investments as they roll out an urban resilience fund that can deliver sustainable infrastructure with greater impact. So we hope this is a shift. And I think this screen can also align very well with ESG reporting and metrics that's increasingly being part of how we do this work. So, as I wrap up, impacts for a net zero future, what do these projects look like? So some of the projects around decarbonizing water. We're doing a lot of work now looking at water reuse, energy impacts for water, so that water can both be provided in a reliable way, but also generate a net zero solution, part of the solution. Industrial decarbonization. Increasingly, corporations are leveraging carbon capture, renewables integration, clean hydrogen, a range of technologies and we're helping clients with that to decarbonize certain industrial sectors. And then zero emission public transit. We're doing a lot of work, and a lot of these projects, especially in cities, are going to look at new ways, new mobility solutions that can reduce energy and emissions. And we're doing a lot of work in that area as well. So as we move from net zero projects, I wanted to also show you what resilient projects that address resiliency and outcomes look like. So these are some of the projects we're working on that are really reflective of some of the build back better type of projects. Environmental restoration. Increasingly, cities are looking at green infrastructure. Revitalizing river systems to protect for future flooding. Create new heat island opportunities, and also at the same time improve access to housing, create new bike corridors, new mobility options, increase carbon capture, and improve public health outcomes. So these are becoming a really important project. Green infrastructure projects in city, big part of the Build Back Better solution. Circular economy, clients are really looking at, and we're doing projects to help cities and clients not just recycle materials but reuse them. And this is going to become a very big part of how Build Back Better projects look like in cities. And it's a big focus of networks like the Resilient Cities Network. And then we're doing increasingly projects like in New York in the UK, optimizing transit networks, helping these cities improve public spaces, enhance safety, build the infrastructure needed for future EV mobility solutions. So at the same time, connecting resilient infrastructure with energy. So these are the type of projects that are part of the Build Back Better solution and what they look like. And they're also scalable and can transform these projects across networks. So to recap, we really just have one chance to build back better. This COVID crisis has really highlighted how we need to look closely at projects and build back the projects that can really drive the outcomes that we need. Roadmaps are really important to realize a resilience dividend. And I've talked to those today and encourage you to reach out at any time if you need more information. They're really a big part of how we're going to build the projects that we need to create for a better world. And of course, leverage partnerships, innovate, and prioritize. We're going to have breakthrough technologies to do this, and roadmaps can get us there. So really, as a final call to action, this is really our collective time, to make a difference in the world and embed resilience into how we, mainstream this into planning and action. The challenge for all of us really is, and for the next generation, is to shift and influence your organizations. Find a way to support and contribute so that we can collectively build back better. Every organization, everyone has a part in this. Having been at this for a long time, find a way to contribute. Look for synergies. Small actions are just as important as the larger ones because they can get us to where we need to be and never give up. So I wish you well and thank you.